In this world, humans, they went through mutations. They ended up with a slightly different appearance, with animal ears, and those who did not have these evolutions suffered prejudice. Our protagonist, he was having his first day of class and he was a normal human, without mutations. Because of that, everyone started throwing cruel looks. Even the other teachers had prejudice against him and called our protagonist a lower class. During the class, the students started to question, and even the inspector kept saying that a lower class could not teach anything to the students. That was because the lower ones, they were weak and barely knew how to use magic. However, our protagonist John, he was very tough and did not pay attention to that. At that moment, he said that whoever did not want to attend his class could leave, but there was one condition. If they leave through the door, they could never return again. And he still explains that they, in fact, know nothing about spiritual powers. The students, who before were making fun, started to become tense. One of the bullies said that a lower class was a weakling and even asked what kind of lesson he would learn from a worm like that. Some students keep laughing at that joke, but John remains silent. "Alright kid, feel free to test me if you think I am weak." He also told the boy to use the maximum power possible. Giving a laugh, the bully said that it was fine and already prepared himself to launch a thunder spear. The inspector, he became terrified, saying that it would even spill over to him. And then the bully prepared the attack and launched that lightning toward John. But in a surprising way, that spear returned to the boy, passing very close to his body. Of course, he was already terrified with fear. And John said that if he wanted, he could eliminate that boy right now, and still says that only idiots judge people by appearance. The people who were around there started to tremble. "You call us lower class, but know that I am much stronger than all of you. In fact, I am stronger than all the professors of this university together. So, if you want to learn how to use magic for real, stay in this room and call me master." But for us to reach this point of the story, we need to go back exactly 100 million years. I selected this work here carefully for you guys, and thanks to everyone who is commenting on the videos. You are amazing. I read every comment from you and I try to give a shout out to everyone who asks. So, if you want to help the channel, leave a hype and a comment and watch the video until the end. Whenever you watch the video until the end, YouTube recommends it to more people. Without further delay, let's go to the story. The work already begins in the year with Earth suffering from pollution. Our protagonist, he was a secret agent. He was looking for some people alive on Earth, so he jumped from his airplane and fell toward Earth. When he arrived there, he saw that there was a boy running away. The kid was crying in fear. Then he ran into the giant monster. Finally, another monster appeared behind him, surrounding him. The guy thought that he would be killed. In despair, the guy, he said goodbye to his family because it would be impossible to leave that place alive. However, he saw a light falling from the sky. It was our protagonist arriving to save the guy at the last moment. He apologizes to the boy for having been late. The man asks, "Who was that badass guy there?" Our protagonist just looks firmly, and the boy ends up thanking John. He was looking for human beings, and finally had found one. However, the guy, he had suffered a very deep wound, and while thanking, he gave his last breath. And in that way, the boy, he fell dead on the ground. After so much time looking for humans, what he found had lost life. At that moment, his scientist friend, he ended up appearing, and said that probably that boy was the last human alive on Earth. And he even says that John should accept that all humans had already been eliminated. Humanity had self-destructed. Environmental pollution ended up causing sudden mutations. Within a few years, the corruptors, which were those monsters, they ended up appearing on Earth. They could not be defeated by simple weapons, since their regenerative power was very high. Because of that, the scientists began to conduct studies on humans so that they could fight those corruptors. However, the scientist says that now that would not help anymore, because the modified humans were finished too late, and humanity had already been erased. However, Johnny did not want to give up searching for other humans, but the scientist says that they had already searched every corner of Earth. Turning to the back, John says that he hopes for a better future. That is because the scientists had developed nano-robots to be able to fix the environment. Those nano-robots, they also destroyed the regeneration ability of the corruptors, and would also use those nano-robots to restore the environment of the entire planet. Because of that, John, he believed that in the future it would be possible for human life to flourish again. He hoped that human civilization would rise again. The scientist says that this is kind of impossible, but that was not what John believed. Even if there was a small possibility, he would believe. Because of that, he asked the scientist to take him to the cryogenic chamber, and thus freeze his body. Even not believing in the future of humanity, the scientist agreed to do that. John's objective was to wake up in the future and make humanity flourish again. Thus, several years began to pass. 370 years had already passed and planet Earth was still the same way. After 1300 years, the monsters were still wandering around the planet. 17,000 years have already passed and the pollution finally began to decrease. After 56,000 years, the monsters were slowly being eliminated. 850,000 years had already passed and planet Earth was already almost without pollution. Life began to flourish again after 1 million years, and thus 100 million years had already passed. Now in the present, a boy was running away. He was not alone, he was together with two more friends running from a monster. The chubby one there keeps saying that it was not good for them to have gone to that place. And the boy with cat ears said to his friend, if they keep like this, they will be caught by the monster. However, they were wanting to reach a secret room. Sebastian said that they were very close. They wanted to activate the guardian god. Using the key, he manages to open the door. This was the laboratory from 100 million years ago. Sebastian, he became tense upon seeing that technology. At that moment, a corruptor entered the room. All of them became paralyzed with fear. Giving a shout, Sebastian asked the guardian god to help them. Thus, the cryogenic capsule breaks, and with a trail of light, our protagonist, he comes out from inside there, eliminating the monster. That was so fast that they did not even see properly what happened. John, he steps firmly on the ground and with power charged in his hands, he said that he made the right bet in believing in the future. John, he goes to a suitcase to see the items that he had stored in the computers. It said that 100 million years had already passed. The most interesting thing of all, he keeps saying, is that the laboratory was very well preserved. All of that was thanks to the nanomachines that were dispersed in the air across the whole planet. Holding a technological cube, he decided that he would like to know what the world had become. Then he turns to the boys and asks how the world outside is. And they keep telling this man to put on some clothes right after putting on his stylish clothes. He said that he will go out to check if Earth had evolved. The gates of that laboratory were gigantic. Outside, he feels the sun hitting his face, and at that moment he becomes surprised. That is because it is 100 million years in the future, and a good time had passed, and Earth now was very pure, very different from before when it was only trash and pollution. The boy, he points there to a path saying that it is that way that they must follow to reach the village. John realized that humans, they were a little different. They possessed animal ears but still spoke the language practically similar to his. The other two also had beast-like appearances. Most likely they were influenced by the nanomachines. Our big guy, he says that he had not yet introduced himself. Our protagonist says that his name is John, and the boy says that his name is Sebastian. The chubby one says that his name is Dampu, and the blue-haired one says that her name is Sandy. Sebastian already starts grabbing our protagonist, saying that they need to go to the village. That is because he would like the guardian god to defeat a corruptor. As soon as they were getting close to the village, Sandy starts to become afraid. That is because the village almost entirely was in flames. The girl runs out, calling for her father and her mother. And our hero, he was thinking about that matter. It seemed that the civilization there of that place actually was quite advanced. The houses, they were built of wood, and there were also paved streets. At that moment, Sebastian, he became shocked. That is because his grandma was fighting against a monster. The old woman shouted very quickly, saying that he should run away. And our protagonist realized that the corruptors were not completely exterminated. And surprisingly, the people in this era also called those monsters corruptors. At that moment, Sebastian begins to use his power, but our protagonist decides to intervene and already gives a kick to the face of that monster. Next, he rescues the grandma, and meanwhile, Sebastian, he was charging his power and ends up creating a fireball, launching it straight at the creature. The monster suffers from the impact. John mentions that he is not feeling the cells of the corruptor's body regenerating. That is because maybe that child was using the powers of the nanomachines. John asks if the people there in the village can use powers, and the old woman said yes. They called that power sacred energy, and only 4 people in the village had that power. Sebastian comes running, asking if his grandmother was well, and the other two, they finally come out of hiding. The old woman says that the village was attacked by several monsters, and the worst of all is that there was a much bigger monster in the surroundings. Those creatures that arrived there were only newborn larvae, and the mother of the monsters that was giving origin to them was in a lake very close. At that moment, a guy appears saying that the grandma actually did quite well. The bully keeps saying that the old woman should not worry anymore because he had arrived to save the village. The old woman asks where the residents are, and the guy says that he took all of them to a shelter and that nobody got hurt. Sebastian goes to his father, and the boy there keeps saying that he brought someone to help. The old woman already turns worried, asking if Sebastian went to the sealed door. And the boy said yes, a little shy, and says that he brought the guardian god. The old woman already turns, asking if it was that man there. And when they look at him, she realizes that the guy, he had some strange ears. The bully even kept saying for Sebastian not to be ridiculous, because an inferior species could not be a guardian god. And our protagonist already becomes confused, right? What do you mean? They are talking about inferior species, guardian god, what crazy people. And Sandy keeps saying that here he is indeed the guardian god, and that he even saved them. But Salt, who is that bully guy there, keeps saying that just by looking at the ears there of that guy, it is already possible to see that he is a weakling, and he still keeps making fun, saying that all the lower classes, they are weaklings and worms. He even says that he himself will go there to the lake, defeat that giant corruptor. And at that moment, he ends up pointing his weapon at John and said that this problem of the village belongs to him and not to this idiot outsider. Next, the guy turns around acting arrogant and says that our protagonist should stay out of this. Just by seeing a scene like this, it is already possible to have an idea that this guy will get beaten, right? Sebastian's father tries to talk with Salt, but the boy keeps saying that they do not need the help of an inferior worm, and even tells them to watch how a true warrior should fight. The old woman keeps calling the boy a fool, and meanwhile John, he only watches without saying a single word. The old woman apologizes, saying that her son he is very rude, and even says that probably Salt he will not manage to defeat that corruptor alone. Because of that, she goes there to help him. But our protagonist says that he himself will go there. He said that he had pride and that he could not be insulted. And Sebastian, he keeps finding that incredible. John says that he will not let a simple boy offend him. We see that that corruptor was really very big and the creature was generating new monsters. Salt had arrived at the edge of the river and charging his power. He said that he will eliminate this threat. At that moment, the monster ended up seeing him, and with his weapon charged, he goes forward saying that he will defeat all the monsters alone. Using a tentacle, that monster ends up releasing an egg, and that egg falls on the ground, and when it breaks, two creatures come out jumping on the guy. With his spear, he manages to split those monsters in half and still keeps boasting, saying that he defeated them with a simple attack. Giving a leap, he approaches the monster and even manages to land an attack on its face. The guy was feeling himself too much and even kept laughing, saying that it was very easy. Thus, the monster began to fall on its back. However, its wound began to regenerate. Why is it healing so fast like that? And next, the monster tries to hit him. However, someone appeared to save him, and it was precisely John, asking if Salt had already finished with the spectacle. The guy started shouting indignantly, asking how that guy did that, but without making much effort, our hero was there blocking the monster's attack. Next, he takes his hand out of his pocket and ends up snapping his fingers. And in that way, an energy of nano-robots ended up hitting the creature. The corruptor fell dead on the ground, and the people of the village came running to know if Salt was well. The old woman realized that the monster was defeated, and because of that she already became shocked, asking if by chance it was her son who did that. The mother creature, she was still alive, only her offspring that were defeated, and boy, could you move away a little. The kid was in shock with fear. Then John went there to take him away from that place. Next, the corruptor tries to hit them, but John ends up jumping. The bully, he was being saved by a lower class. Next, he asks who that guy is, because our protagonist had defeated a giant corruptor using his magic. In fact, those nano-robots were the only things that managed to stop the regeneration of the monsters. And our protagonist explains that all that there are nano-machines, something that they called sacred power. Just now the boy, he used an electrical energy to be able to hit that creature, but it did not have that nano-robot power. All that was new to the boy, and he kept asking if by chance that power belonged only to the guardian god. Our protagonist simply ignores and says that he wanted to say one thing to him, and says that the problem of those monsters hitting the village is not only his problem. The guy refuses, saying that this problem is indeed his own, because he was responsible for protecting that village. But John says that this problem was not only Salt's, but also his own. After all, guys, our protagonist was a monster hunter. The creature begins to launch its tentacles, and John thinks that first he would need to immobilize the creature. The beast was very crazy, whipping its tail everywhere. Salt asked how that guy managed to dodge all the attacks. At that moment, his hand becomes full of electricity. Our hero, he says that he stayed more than 100 million years sleeping, and that he returned to end all the monsters and save humanity. Salt already starts asking what this guy is talking about. The history of humanity has always been marked by wars and conquests. The human species, it cannot live in peace. But in the last era, the monsters ended up dominating the planet, and the scientists created these nano-robots that allowed humans to use powers. And thus our hero ends up releasing a burst of energy, and this power ends up hitting the monster directly, turning it into dust. They keep watching that power before their eyes, and everyone becomes shocked. Sebastian keeps saying that this is incredible, and the power was so great that it even went out of Earth, guys, and next even the skies opened. Salty started stuttering. He did not even know exactly what to say. And John revealed that in fact the nanorobots are scientific weapons and not a spiritual power. From afar it seemed that there was someone in the bushes. A woman was there to investigate these corruptors, and kept saying that something appeared in Kodama village. Using her glasses to see better, she saw that there was a lower class guy who possessed an absurd power. And of course she became very excited. And when standing up she said that she would report this to the guildmaster. At night our protagonist, he was using that magic cube to see the hologram of his scientist friend. The guy reveals that he continued doing some studies after our protagonist went to sleep in the cryogenic chamber. He imagines that the environment could indeed have evolved because of the nanorobots. However, there was a problem, and he would go straight to the point. Even if the environment was evolving, the monsters were not dying completely. Yeah, it seems that John learned that in the worst possible way. After 5,000 years that John was sleeping, the scientist says that he ended up discovering something. He even reveals that he also kept freezing himself to be able to watch the evolution for a longer time. And what he discovered is that the number of corruptors was constantly decreasing. However, there was a very important detail. It seemed that the corruptors, they were evolving, becoming more intelligent. And we see that the scientist managed to use the satellite to see a corruptor that seemed to have an intelligence of human level. Yeah, of course the guy became shocked when he discovered that, because if the corruptors evolved to have intelligence, they would be practically indestructible. Because of that he managed to use the nano-robots to modify all the people, thus giving powers to them so that they could defend themselves from these monsters. The scientist reveals to John that it was himself who altered the nanorobots to make the human race evolve, and John realized that now practically all the residents there of this world possessed a certain level of power. In John's hands there was a syringe full of nanorobots, and in the video call the scientist said that if he applied those nanorobots in the body, he would gain a certain knowledge and more power. When he applied it, our protagonist saw that this power of the nanomachines was 100% compatible with his body. Extending the hands, he thought that nothing had changed, but then he began to create objects. Now he also possessed the power to create any type of item, and the scientist keeps saying that this will be very useful in the battle against the corruptors. He had hidden this new power in some laboratories spread all over the world, and still keeps saying that John's mission is to travel all over the world, taking these powers and spreading them to other people so that they could fight the monsters. At that moment, a group of knights were going in the direction of the kingdom. Then he ended up hearing someone shouting his name, and it was that girl who was investigating Kodama village. Very excited, she says that she has news and ended up telling everything that she saw in that battle. Later in that kingdom, we see a beautiful girl studying, and the scientist warns that when our protagonist woke up, the world would already be very different from the last time the scientist saw it. There were several recordings that the guy made, and in the last one he was already very old and said that he started to trust in John's plan that it would be possible to save humanity. It seems that our protagonist, he had become a little sad since his friend was aging little by little. In the last message, the scientist said that he was counting on him to save the entire Earth. When the video ends, the two boys come running, calling for the guardian god. They say that everyone was looking for him. That is because the villagers were curious. Lukoi, he ended up noticing something interesting. Sebastian, he had a key on his chest, and our hero kept looking at that and even asked the boy where he got that pendant. Sebastian says that this key belongs to his clan and that they have protected this key for many and many generations. They said that when danger arrived at Kodama village, the guardian of the key should go to the laboratory to free the guardian god. But they were so excited that they started dragging John to the village. After arriving there, the place was in complete celebration. Everyone was curious to see the guardian god, and thus he appears being pulled by the two boys. He hears people saying that this guy is an inferior species, and they still keep making fun of Salt because he was saved by a worm. Instead of thanking our protagonist, they were making fun. Then a guy there stands up saying that while everyone was running away in fear, John went there and saved the entire village, and because of that they should thank the guardian god. The old woman says that she finally found the young man. She was thanking him on behalf of the village and says for him not to mind the comments of the younger ones. Sebastian's father said that if it were not for John's help, the entire village would have been erased. Our protagonist says that they do not need to thank him, but if by chance they want to do something in gratitude, they could give some information to him. He would like to know the state of this world, and that leaves the guy there a little confused. Grandma says that since they live in a somewhat distant village, they do not know much about the news of the world, and it would be better to go to the capital. The capital of this country was called Kolosha, and it was there that the king reigned. The people of Kodama village, they went a lot to the capital to sell their clothes, since the fabrics of that village they were very valued. The road was very long, the old woman keeps saying, but she imagines that the guardian god will manage to do well. Since our protagonist did not know the way, the old woman says that Sebastian had matters to resolve in the capital and could take him. Thus, they end up agreeing to leave the next morning. That is because the old woman said that she would like to enroll the boy in the magic school. Salty questions saying that he should be the guide of the guardian god. But Grandma says that her son has nothing to resolve in the capital. That is why he did not need to go there. And at that moment, Salt begins to argue with his mother, saying that he himself would take him. Sebastian says that Salty had not passed the tests of the academy. That is why he was not approved. At that moment, John, he realized that there were sacred knights in this world. And back to those knights, the captain, he finds it interesting that a human who does not possess evolved ears had defeated a corruptor. It was very difficult to believe, because the inferior species they were weak, but the girl she admits saying that even she became surprised. That report was very interesting because it was something very difficult to happen. At that moment, the monster appears right behind the girl, and before the monster manages to attack her, the knight manages to defend her. The guy splits the monster in half and, giving a smile, the blonde guy said that he would like to personally meet this man that she had mentioned. Early the next day, the scene goes to Kodama village, when Astriel had woken up. He never thought that he could see Earth so beautiful like this again. He even says that he would like his scientist friend to see this scene. At that moment, Sandy appears calling for the guardian god and even says that he should change clothes. The guy liked to stay that way. Then guys, the time had already arrived for them to leave the village heading to the capital. Sebastian, he ends up saying goodbye to his grandmother, and Salt, he was all grumpy saying that he should be the guide. Then John says there to Salt that the moves that he used in the battle yesterday were not bad. That is why he would be waiting for him in the capital as soon as he trained and became stronger. Very motivated, the guy kept saying there deep down that he would give his best. Sebastian's father tells the boy that he must keep himself safe, and thus they end up saying goodbye to the two. Our protagonist would begin a new journey going to the capital. And the walk was long, guys, and they had to pass through several places. Sebastian, he knew the way very well because he traveled often to the capital. At night, when they stopped to make a camp, our protagonist asked how much time was left. Sebastian said that there were about 4 more days left, and our hero mentioned that it was actually quite close. While eating a small bread, Sebastian asks why that big guy there wanted to know more about this world. To avoid telling the whole story that he came from 100 million years ago, our protagonist said that it was just a secret. He knew that the corruptors would not simply disappear. At least that was what the scientists said. In fact, the corruptors, they were evolving. Normally, they only reproduced in very polluted environments, but he saw that that giant worm was reproducing in a very pure and clean lake. That is why John, he was so worried, imagining that these monsters now they will reproduce even more. Sebastian asks, why does the guardian god have such a scary face? And he says that the boy should not worry, because he was only thinking about what the capital was like. But the first thing that he wanted to discover about this world was how humans dealt with these monsters. He would need to find a way to make people stronger so they could fight against these creatures. After all, guys, he is afraid of that evolved monster that the scientist had managed to find by satellite. At that moment, a horse noise comes approaching, and our hero realizes that it was a human. That night, he apologizes for bothering these people and even says that he would like to talk for a moment with that white-haired guy. Our hero realizes that this knight was talking with him and already quickly asks who he was. The man says that his name is Argus and he is the captain of Squad 7 of the royal capital. Ah, so this is a sacred knight of the royal guard. But one of the female knights, she was extremely angry and started saying that an inferior class trash should act with more respect with a knight. But her captain ended up getting down from the horse and even apologized to the boy, saying that it was very rude of him to speak while on top of that mount. Our protagonist stands up to greet the guy while he was also apologizing for the rudeness of his female knight. Argus asks where John was going, and who answers is Sebastian, saying that they came from Kodama village and are going to the royal capital. That girl? She keeps laughing and says that she is sure that they are the ones they were looking for. She says that there were records of corruptors in that region and even asks if by chance they were involved with those monsters. What? Does she think that I am involved with those creatures? Argus tells his knight to stay quiet. Argus mentions that that boy is wearing fabrics from Kodama village which are of high quality. So that meant that they probably came from Kodama village and were not simple bandits who attacked villages. However, he ends up drawing his sword, and pointing to our protagonist, he said that those two they were different, because he had never seen clothes so strange like John's, and even asks from which country he belonged. He even mentions that there are bandits in this region who use children to rob travelers, and they pretended to be harmless only to get help and then attack from behind. Desperate, Sebastian says that they are not bandits, but good people. But that female knight, she becomes angry, and at that moment Sebastian begins to use his power. Argus, he realizes that that child possessed spiritual power and even tells the boy not to try anything funny and begins to surround him with swords. Sebastian realizes that he was rendered, and meanwhile John, he remained calm. Pointing the sword to our protagonist, Argus realized that our hero was also strong and then asks where he came from. Depending on the answer, the knight says that he would eliminate the young man, but John, he remained quiet. The atmosphere was very intense between them, and then John said that he also came from Kodama village, but that woman, she does not believe and keeps saying that they are the bandits who attacked that village. However, Argus said that he believed the boy. And after putting the sword away, he undoes the spell around Sebastian, saying that they are not lying. The boy even says that John, he is the guardian god of Kodama village. Ah, he is the guardian god. I understand. So the guy does not give much importance to that. And our hero asks if the questionnaire is already finished. After returning to the horse, he apologizes for the rudeness, and said that what he did there is only routine work. And even says that if by chance Sebastian is going to the capital, they will probably meet again. And he even says that if our protagonist needs anything, he could count on him. His female knight finds that very strange because she was treating very well someone who was from an inferior class. And Lancerai stays there, finding Argus's attitude a little strange. While the knights were going away, the girl asked why her captain acted like that. It seemed that he was treating with extreme respect someone who was from an inferior class. And he keeps repeating in his mind, saying that that guy was not an inferior class at all. He even says that she must stop calling others inferior class. A green-haired woman there, a knight, said that she agrees with the captain because Argus was not totally wrong. She mentions that she also felt an intense aura around that guy. Argus, he admits that he tried to move forward to attack that guy 3 times. However, his body did not move. It seemed that he was paralyzed. It was as if an invisible energy had been holding his body. And he even says that John did all that even with his hands in his pockets. He had tried to attack our protagonist, but he could not. The girl there even asks if the captain used the sacred power, and he said yes. And when he said that he could not activate his power, The girl there, she became shocked. He even managed to use that sacred sword power on Sebastian, but he could not do that with John. The girls even begin to doubt if that guy was really that strong. Argus said that he did not want to pick a fight with that guy, because among all the knights, maybe only the great captain would be capable of fighting equally with John. But the girl there with brown hair, she was very angry. For her, it was unacceptable for an inferior class to have more strength than them, but Argus confirms, saying that John had much more power than them. The people keep discussing if it was him or not who attacked Komoda village. Argus tells the girl that it does not seem to have been John, because he seemed to be peaceful. And since those two were also returning to the capital, they could be investigated later. Thus, they end up arriving at the capital, and Argus confirms, saying that they will investigate a little more this John from Komoda village. Because if he is willing to be their ally, they could use him in the battle against the demons. Early the next day, our protagonist, he continues the journey. Sebastian says that he is happy for having met our protagonist, because he was very strong and he wanted to learn a lot from him. And he even says that Argus was one of the most powerful captains of the Royal Guard, and while making some battle gestures, he told John that Captain Argus, he was so strong that he was one of the most popular there in the royal city. Sebastian also explains that people evolved to have the appearance of animals, and that interfered with the elemental power they were able to use. John realized that people in this world treated the nano-machines as if they were spirits. That power was nothing more than science, but people thought that it really was a magical power. He even keeps remembering that girl calling him a damn inferior being. So he asks Sebastian about that thing of treating them as inferior beings. He wanted to know what kind of race exists in this world. The boy says that some look like fish, others like insects, and others even like mammals. His grandma says that thousands of years ago people could live only in limited areas, but today that is different. Some live like fish and others live like insects, and John realized that these changes made humans become much stronger. And all of this happened within the 100 million years that he stayed sleeping. So those that you call inferior species are those who did not evolve? Sebastian says that that is exactly it, and many of them are captured and turned into slaves. People despise the inferior species, even more because they were fragile and barely managed to use magic. But Sebastian says that he does not see it like that. He sees all people as being equal, and even admits that this world it is very unfair and cruel. Our big guy, he gives a smile and says that Sebastian is a good boy. At that moment, they see someone approaching and they notice that this person needed help. So the girl, she ends up falling on the ground. She was very weak, and Sebastian goes there to see how the girl was. Our protagonist, he already realizes right away that something was wrong. The girl had serious wounds, however she had a normal ear. That meant that she was also an inferior being, as they say. She was very hurt and could barely breathe. She is full of wounds and very serious injuries. Sebastian holds the girl and asks if she was okay. At that moment, our protagonist said that he would heal her with his magical power. However, she became serious and even said that the cottonhead boy should not move. If by chance he moved a muscle, she would cut Sebastian's neck. The atmosphere becomes tense, and then our protagonist understood everything. They had fallen into a trap. At that moment, he heard a noise from behind, and there were some bandits using invisibility magic. Laughing, the guy says that the girl did a great job. She had acted just as he ordered. John explains that nanomachine function, it absorbs the visuals around and makes the person appear to be invisible. The bad side is that when she moved, that invisibility disappeared. The guy points the sword at John, and Sebastian keeps shouting, telling them not to hurt his friend. He even tries to use magic, but John shouts very loudly for Sebastian to stay still. The boy does not understand what he means by that, since it was just our protagonist throwing a huge power there and defeating everyone, right? But he only says to Sebastian that they lost and were captured. No, John, we need to fight. The bandit keeps saying to lock that brat up already, and one of the bandits asks if John can also use spiritual power. Next, he ends up kicking our protagonist, and after he falls to the ground, the bandit keeps saying that inferior beings do not know how to use magic. But the boss says there to his henchmen not to damage the merchandise, because slaves that are injured are worth less. Thus he keeps saying for everyone to learn, and after pointing the finger at Sebastian, he prepares an electric magic, saying that the boy will take a nap, and thus ends up making him become unconscious. Hours later, Sebastian wakes up with John asking if he was okay. The boy was scared, and John reveals that he had healed the boy's body. That is why he was healthy. Realizing that he was in another place, Sebastian asks where they were. Our hero says that after they were attacked, they tied him up and took him to this strange place. These bandits attacked people on the roads and brought them to this place. The people were very hurt, and there were even humans who had evolved. So John understands that those bandits ended up imprisoning anyone. Sebastian asks where John's clothes are, and he says that that person had taken his clothes because they were different. So you stay totally calm just wearing shorts? Yes, I already got used to it. The most important thing that Sebastian wanted to know is why John did not finish those bandits right away, since he would have power to do that very easily. In the other room, one of the bandits asks the girl to feed the prisoners, and after they open the door, they stay waiting. The girl, she approaches saying that they could eat, and Sebastian already gets furious asking what that idiot girl is doing. She says that she does not care if he hates her, because she would not expect his forgiveness, and the kid stays there dying of anger. John turns saying that the girl she was very kind. What kind? I ended up plotting a trap against you. But our protagonist says that he knows very well why she did that. Next, he stands up and after touching the bars, he begins to break them. The girl cannot even believe what she is seeing. The guy had broken all the bars, looking like he was tearing paper. Now that the bandits had left, he could talk with that girl alone and asks where the bandits are keeping her family members. The girl asks how he knew that. Then he begins to heal the girl, saying that she was forced to do that, since they had probably kidnapped her family. He had many experiences because of his missions back in the past, so he knew that when he looked there at the girl and saw the injuries, it was that she was a prisoner, just like them. I know that you are only doing what they tell you, because they are threatening you with something. At that moment she becomes very worried, and said that they kidnapped her little brother. She tells that those bandits killed her parents there in the village, and ended up kidnapping the boy, locking him in a room, and they even said that if she did not do what they told her, she would never see her brother again. The poor girl begins to cry, saying that it was those bandits who killed her parents, and Sebastian realized that it was because of that that John had surrendered to the bandits. Upon hearing that story, our protagonist, he becomes furious. John, did you let yourself be captured on purpose? Giving a smile, he said that yes, and that his desire is to erase all these scums from the earth. One of the bandits keeps hearing the noise from inside and even decides to go there to see what was happening. But at that instant, John ends up kicking the door, hitting that bastard. The guy flies far away and furious. Our hero says that he will finish all these trash. Ah, my son. The biggest mistake of those guys there was letting our John get out of control. He says that 100 million years ago he was a secret agent, but before that, when he was a child, he had grown up on the streets. His dream was to be a secret agent to fight crime, since he had suffered a lot with the illegalities of this world. But soon he had realized one thing. What the world needed the most were people who fought injustices. A group of bandits came to him wanting to threaten him. Because he was an orphan, he ended up living on the streets, threatened by bandits. The guys wanted to force him to commit crimes, and if by chance he did not do that, he would suffer the consequences. However, since childhood he was already very powerful, and managed to get rid of those guys. And from that moment he began to fight crime even when he was a child. And after becoming young he did not change guys. He continued beating up mafiosos. His desire was to make the world a much better place, but until one day he met someone who would become his best friend. The man said that he was looking for John, and that one was the scientist. Guys, back to the present, he had already beaten these bastards badly. More bandits appeared, but none of them was enough. He was defeating them one by one, and when two more appeared, John ended up throwing a henchman on top of them. The bandit ended up holding his companion, and that was the perfect opening for John to finish the other guy. The guy realized that he was screwed, and even asked what kind of human he was. Falling to the ground, the guy keeps trembling all over, and the prisoners realized that there was shouting happening on the upper floor. Sylvia, she became very afraid, thinking that maybe John was getting beaten, but Sebastian said that the guardian god was teaching those bandits a lesson, and even said for Sylvia to stay calm, because all of them will be freed. They only should do everything that John ordered. But Sylvia keeps saying that the leader of the bandits, he was very powerful, because he had a sacred spiritual power. But we see that the guy, he was completely terrified of our protagonist. The guy keeps shouting, saying that if by chance John wants money, he can give the money that he wanted. Or maybe the guy desired slaves, and he even points to a cage saying that he could take as many as he wanted. And at that moment John realizes that that was Sylvia's little brother, and begins to become even angrier with the leader of the villains. What happened, coward? Have you already finished talking? The rat guy. He becomes completely terrified and even asks himself why he is not able to use his spiritual power in front of this guy. Or rather, what kind of power did this guy have? John says that that guy's luck is that they were only small-time bandits, and that his objective at first was not to interfere with these trash bandits. John takes the opportunity to insult this rat guy with the worst words possible, and the guy becomes so afraid that he begins to want to run away. And to defeat our hero, he ends up pulling a lever, giving a laugh. He says that John will not be able to defeat that creature. And after the elevator rises, a corruptor appears. What? He had a corruptor stored here inside. The monster seemed to have suffered some mutation and showed signs of intelligence. The bandit keeps laughing, saying that this guy who was acting arrogant would end up badly. The corruptor gives a very loud scream and already rushes toward our protagonist. John looks seriously and next defends himself with his own hands. Upon seeing that scene, the rat guy becomes completely terrified. John says that since the day he was born, he already had a superhuman body. He already possesses an abnormal amount of muscle fibers. And to help, he also underwent nano-robot experiments. And with his hand filled with power, he says that because of that he can fight very well against monsters, and ends up releasing a blast of magical power. The bandit realizes that his monster, which was his special weapon, was defeated without great difficulties. And as he approaches, John asks what the next step would be, or if by chance the guy had already given up. The crazy guy begins to sweat cold, dying of fear, and very politely he asks if there is any chance for him to escape from there. And without answering anything, John simply punches the bastard in the face. Next, he takes his clothes back, and now that he had his clothes recovered, he could return to his mission, which was to save the slaves. But he could not forget Sylvia's little brother. But he tells the boy to stay there, because he will come back soon. First, he would need to search the documents to discover a little more about those bandits. When opening a drawer, he observes an important document that had a somewhat strange smell, John keeps saying. And when looking at those letters, he realizes that he could not read anything, but he knew that it was something important. Wait a minute, we speak the same language, but I cannot read these letters. I will have to ask Sebastian to teach me there. But the strangest thing is that those bandits were using corruptors, and after stretching his hand, he begins to use his power to make an analysis. Through the nanorobots, he manages to activate the security cameras of the nanorobots themselves. Guys, those micro-robots, they kept filming everything everywhere, at every moment, and so he began to watch the recordings. He saw that those bandits, they sold the slaves and also the corruptors to some organizations, and there was a very rich man who was interested in buying those monsters. And with an evil face, he said that he had a plan in mind. John was watching all of that. The prison was right under the capital, and the place there was busy. Sylvia, together with Sebastian, had already left from inside the prison, and the girl, she became very emotional when she saw her little brother. With tears in his eyes, he came running toward her, and so the two ended up hugging each other. She cried, asking if he was well, and next she thanked John because if it were not for him, she would still be imprisoned. Our protagonist found it interesting that the royal guard acted very quickly, and as soon as they were called, they already went there to arrest the bandits. The old man with ram horns, he was the guildmaster of the city, and upon realizing that it was John who did that, he went there. With a hoarse voice, he asked if it was John responsible for all of that. He introduces himself as Paddock, the guildmaster, and thanks him for having saved those prisoners. But the guy had a somewhat suspicious look. Even if this young man was an inferior species, he had defeated many enemies. After thanking John, he says that there had been several reports of bandits roaming around the city region, and John asks if it is he who orders the capture of bandits, but the guild chief says that he does not have that type of authority. Dealing with that type of crime is the job of the guild sworn to the king. Even if he commanded the city guard, he did not have enough power to interfere in those investigations. At that moment, our protagonist realized that this guy acted more like a mayor of the city and not like a police chief. But even so, he would need to discover who that noble was who was buying the monsters, since he would probably use those creatures to attack other people. So John ends up handing to the mayor some documents that he found in that bandits guild. Upon seeing that, the chief, he becomes surprised, because it was a list with the other clients that the bandits made deals with, and he even celebrates, saying that he could use those data to investigate and arrest other criminals. And our protagonist understood that he helped the city a lot to get rid of those bad guys. When looking at those two, our protagonist keeps thinking what he will do with those two children, so he turns to the mayor and asks what happens to the slaves after they are freed. The man says that there is no program to help them, so they would probably become homeless. That happens because they did not have parents, guys. And the old man assures that there is no way to help them, even more because they are inferior species, so it would be very difficult to give them jobs. Giving aside, John comments that the people of this world are very stupid. Of course he would not leave those two children abandoned on the street. So he has a brilliant idea. He asks Sylvia if there were some place where she could work, if she would accept it, and the girl said yes. So he said that he will take care of her. That is because Argus had said a few days ago that if he needed help, he only had to summon him. The scene changes to the royal capital of Kulosia, at Argus's property. He ends up feeling a shiver and his companion asks what it was, and the guy keeps saying that it is nothing. Next, he gets down from the horse and says that he only had a bad feeling. He thanks his companions. They said that they made a good expedition. Next, he ends up entering his mansion. His servants welcome him back. He leaves his suitcase with the butler and everyone there seemed to be worried about something. Argus says that something had happened and the butler keeps saying that he would not like to worry the boss with anything, but ends up whispering something in his ear. From far away, a little blonde who had already appeared keeps observing everything, and she seemed to be bothered by something. After thanking for the report, Argus says that he will withdraw. Scratching his head, he said that the situation was much worse than he thought. The corruptors were already appearing in the capital itself, and he even asks how they entered. Most likely someone had brought them there on purpose. If that were the case, the biggest suspect would be the Magic Academy, because they were very stubborn. That is why the guy there, Urgos, he keeps saying that he needs a very powerful ally to fight against the Magic Academy. And meanwhile, our protagonist, he was continuing with his journey. It was not the capital of that state that they were going to, that is why they continued to travel. Sylvia asks what kind of work she will have to do, and the big guy keeps saying for her not to be so anxious. Since she knew how to read and write and was also good at mathematics, she would certainly be able to find a good job. And that leaves the girl very happy. Sebasti points the finger saying that it is to that capital there that they are going. Now yes girl, you finally arrived, and the capital of that kingdom was very beautiful. It was already getting late afternoon when they arrived. Sylvia comments that the city it is very vibrant, but almost everything there depended on imports because they were not great producers of anything. Sebastian even says that the clothes from Kodama were very well valued there in that city. And when looking to the side John, he realizes that there were many different races, besides that the culture of the people was also very varied, and even the streets seemed to be very clean. Public order was also not the worst, however, problems still existed, and John realizes that there were some people there being exploited, and he even comments that this happens everywhere. By the way, Sebastian, when is the admission exam of the academy? And the boy says that it is next week. That is why they had some time to prepare, and the little blonde was there observing them. She was feeling bothered, because those were inferior species, thus they go to an inn, and now that there was a very soft bed, the two boys end up jumping on it with everything. They celebrate saying that they finally have a warm bed to sleep. Now that John arrived in the city, he would need to investigate a little more about the culture and the way they fought against monsters. He would also need money to live in that town, since he did not have much. This money that they got was a reward for having dealt with those bandits, and John, he also needed to solve the problem of the job of those two siblings. He believes that that night could be useful to help him, and even says that he will look for him as soon as possible, but for now he says that he will research a little more about the corruptors, even because there were bandits and criminals who were using the power of those monsters to obtain advantages. The corruptors were dangerous beings that could not be left uncontrolled. He would not let repeat what happened to him 100 million years ago. He would not let this beautiful world be destroyed again. John asks Sebastian where he needs to go to do research, and the boy says that normally people read books. However, books were very expensive, and there in Kodama village they shared all the books that they bought, but in the capital there was a library, and he could go there to do research. John finds that interesting, and even says that he will make good use of the library to be able to find clues. But when he arrives there, the librarian says that he cannot use it. That is because the books they were considered national property, and he did not have a license to be able to read them. Only official students recognized by the academy or by the faculty could read, and even nobles had access. Sebastian says that John still does not know how to read. During the trip he learned a little about some letters, but it was not enough. Putting his hand on his head, he says that the situation is very complicated, and there is no way for him to do research. But at that moment, two young men appear there looking for trouble. They call John, and when he turns around, one of the boys tries to hit him with a punch. Our hero holds the boy's hand without great difficulties, and after beginning to squeeze the young man's hand, he asks why they simply did not introduce themselves. The boy tries to use his magic, and when he was about to make an explosion, our hero threw his arm away and the explosion ended up hitting the sky. Giving a laugh, the boy says that our protagonist had a sharp eye, and Sylvia keeps saying that it is forbidden to use magical power in the middle of the street. Our hero asks who they are, and the boys say that their client was feeling bothered by John's presence. Ah, so they were hired by someone. Actually, that saves my time. The boys say that if by chance John leaves the city, he would not suffer threats anymore. But since John refused to leave, the boy rushes toward him. However, John holds his fist, leaving the bully surprised, next throws him hard onto the ground. The impact is powerful, and his companion begins to use a fire magic and launches it toward our hero. However, John manages to block it very easily. The redhead was thinking that his power had worked, but then John appears in the middle of the smoke. He ends up grabbing the boy. Do you really think that you are capable of hurting me? If you have courage, try again to hit me. The boy keeps thinking how an inferior species is so strong like that, and next someone tells them to stop. It was precisely that female knight who served Argus, and she arrived there to stop the fight. She keeps blaming our protagonist, saying that he is responsible for this whole fight. But John, he says that he acted in self-defense. But the girl becomes angry, saying that inferior species, they always cause trouble, and she even keeps threatening to arrest him for beating innocent people. That girl, she was very prejudiced and keeps saying that he barely arrived in the city and was already causing problems. Some people began to approach, and a woman said that she was passing by and observed the whole confusion and said that John, he was suddenly attacked by those young men, and still confirms that the boy only acted in self-defense, leaving the knight surprised. She recognized those boys and says that they are students of the Magic University, so she goes there to ask if they were well. Putting her hand on her head, she said that she hopes that the law is not involved in this. After going to the protagonist, she says that there was a misunderstanding, and the boy asks if the Holy Knights also do patrols. In response, she said that the captain was very busy, so she had to help, but in fact she was only passing by when she saw that fight. Suspicious, she keeps saying to herself that this John, he is very powerful, because alone he managed to deal with a magic university that were very strong. When saying goodbye, she tells John to try not to cause problems. Wait a minute, girl. Do you mind giving me some information? She asks what he would like to know. And so the scene goes to Argus's property. Our hero was asking the knight to hire Sylvia and her little brother, even because Argus had said that if John needed anything, he should count on him. Wait a minute, man. The last time I saw you, you did not have this many children with you, no. Our hero looked like a babysitter, guys. John ends up telling them that he had managed to free those kids from a prison of bandits. and he even explains to Argus that all the criminals were taken to the police. The guy found that interesting because he dealt with all the bandits alone. When asking about the children, John said that they are orphans, and since they were from inferior species, they would not be able to get a job easily. Argus says that John does not have the obligation to take responsibility for those children, but John says that when he decides to save someone, he goes until the end. Argus becomes impressed, and the girl there in the back, she becomes bothered, since she was very prejudiced. The siblings, they keep making a cute face to be accepted, so Argus ends up accepting, saying that they could live and work in his mansion, but with one condition: he would like John to be an instructor at the academy. Later, the siblings end up putting on house staff clothes. John keeps saying that they looked good with those new clothes, and Sylvia, she thanks Argus. Next, he asks 2 employees of his house to teach those 2 young ones how they should work, and they were not to discriminate against the children. Thus, our protagonist ends up saying goodbye to Sylvia and her little brother. While they walked, Johnny asks why Argus wanted him to be an instructor. The blonde, he admits that he does not know John well, but he knows that he is a decent person. He would like John to infiltrate the Magic Academy to discover if they were behind the appearance of corruptors. Wait a minute, what do you mean by that? The knight explains that this country, it was suffering attacks from several factions that were disputing control. The current king of the country was with very weak in health, and because of that the succession battle behind the scenes had already begun. The biggest problem is that there was someone without right to the throne who was also aiming to take this country. And that person was using the corruptors to drag innocent people. John, he knew who it was and understood that Argus's objective was to investigate the Magic Academy, since he believed that they were involved in this. Do you think that the most suspicious place is the Hansky Academy? And the blonde says yes. Next, he ends up knocking on the door. Argus says that this girl will help him enter the academy. That was his little sister, Miriam. And the girl already asks who this inferior being is and even asks if her brother is speaking seriously, if he is thinking about putting this guy who was a worm inside the Magic Academy. The girl's brother becomes angry, telling her not to act with rudeness, and she continues insulting our hero, leaving Sebastian very angry. John says that Argus's sister, she seems to be very prejudiced, and the female knight said that it is true. She is very prejudiced. But John says that that girl there is not any different. Waving the fan, she continues offending John and says that he cannot enter there as a student because he would suffer discrimination, and believes that an inferior species like him cannot handle the instructor position. Sebastian says that our hero barely knows how to read. Hey boys, stop with that, okay? He does not know how to read, and on top of that he is a worm. But Sebastian says that John, he is very powerful and that he can teach many things. The girl keeps analyzing, looking at him from head to toe, and says that at least John seems to be a little strong. But being strong alone does not make him be a good teacher. Argus, he keeps scratching his head, saying that his sister is very difficult to deal with. The girl says that prejudiced people are very difficult, as if she was not, right? Next, Argus says that he will talk with his sister later, but John asks what he would do being an instructor of that academy. According to the knight, he saw that our protagonist was very powerful, so he could teach magical arts. Alright, I know that you want me to teach spiritual arts, but which arts in specific? The guy says that there are 4 elements, which are fire, lightning, ice, and healing, and asks our protagonist to teach at least one of those basic elements. John asks if that is all, and of course the knight becomes a little impressed, right? How is that just that? That is already very difficult. He even asks if by any chance John can use more than one element. At that moment he remembered that that bandit, he possessed a, let us say, special power. Because of that, John realized that all the people who possessed more than one element were seen as if they were super powerful. And since our big guy, he controlled the nanorobots calmly and managed to use all the power, he said that he will shake the common sense of this era. After 1 week, he managed to enter the academy. It was the admission exam and Sebastian was there taking the test. He had managed an interview to be able to enter the academy and was going to the room of the rectors. Argus was going together with him to pass more credibility. John even asks how the knight managed to place him inside there. Then Argus explains that at least once per year the Royal Knights, they can indicate a person to become an instructor at the Magic Academy. The bald fat man keeps wondering if by any chance Argus is crazy to bring an inferior species. And meanwhile our protagonist, he was thoughtful. The guy keeps looking at him somewhat suspicious, and next he takes him to the room where they should enter. The director was waiting for them, and when they enter he realizes that the director was a woman. Argus, he greets the director in a very respectful way, and she says that he was the best student of the class. Because of that, she was very grateful for the efforts of Argus. In a somewhat arrogant way, the director said that she already heard about the rumors. It seemed that he was trying to fight against the corruptors and also doing some investigations about the factions that were attacking the country. She even says that it is too much for a single man to deal with alone, and even asks what is the interest of Argus in bringing this inferior species. Our hero already realized that the people inside there were nothing different from the people outside. And all 3 keep looking at John with a suspicious face. The big guy simply gives a sigh, and Argus says that this instructor of his that he had brought was faster than any other person. At least when it came to ability, he did not lose to anyone. The director asks if he is speaking seriously, that this simple inferior species had a great combat power. One of the professors who was accompanying, he said that he does not believe that. In no way the Sacred Academy, which was super prestigious, could accept an inferior species as an instructor, and he even asks if they are intending to dishonor the academy. The director says that Lord Gita had already made clear his position and asks Lord Ludman. The old man agrees, saying that most of the students come from noble families. Because of that, an inferior species teaching those students would be something very disrespectful. The director, all arrogant, says that she agrees with her two counselors. However, they would hear what John had to say. Our big guy, he approaches and apologizes for his late introduction and says that his name is John from the city of Kodama. The woman, she becomes surprised because he did not get offended with anything. Then he asks if an inferior species is incapable of teaching just for being from an inferior species or because he lacks abilities. Are you wanting to say that I do not have the capacity to teach anyone? The woman says that it is both, saying that inferior species, they are not apt, and even asks if he could prove that he was apt for this function. Argus has the brilliant idea of testing John, saying that he is stronger than any other teacher, and so they go to the combat hall to test our protagonist. And it is at these moments that we already know that it will go bad for this crowd. It would be that ugly professor who would test John, and he keeps saying that John is lucky to have few students there today because it was exam day, because otherwise he would be embarrassed in front of everyone. Our hero, he remains postured like a true badass Sigma. The director said that the rules were simple. They would battle one against the other, and she would stay observing to see if John really had practical combat abilities. Some students who had already finished the test begin to pass through the corridors and keep finding that curious. Miriam, she was there watching everything and said that Professor Gita, he was very strong. Because of that, she thinks it is useless for John to try to fight against him. Curious, the director keeps saying that she will see how far that guy will manage to go. Ergos, he was a little worried because he still had not seen John in combat. He knew that the inferior species, they possessed a weaker body and also possessed less spiritual energy, but he hopes that his judgment is not wrong. Gita, he prepares for combat and says that he will make the first move, charging a fireball. The attack passes very close to John, and the students keep finding that incredible. And we see that this professor, he only wanted to keep showing off to the students. Next, he uses an electric magic and throws it on top of our hero. And again, the big guy, he keeps doing flips there, trying to dodge. That instructor, he had not given up and begins to launch a new barrage of electric arrows, and even keeps asking until when this boy will keep trying to run away. To intensify the blows, he begins to throw fireballs. John, he breathes deeply and says that he hates having to use his power against other humans, but he had no choice. At that moment, he extends his hand and begins to use his power. Alright, I will show only a fraction of my power to all of you. A gravitational magic begins to hold that guy. He is crushed on the ground in a humiliating way. Both that professor and the director, they became frightened. They did not expect that. Even Argos, who already imagined that he was strong, did not imagine that he was that strong. And Miriam, she became surprised with frightened eyes. That professor, who was one of the strongest of the academy, was being widely humiliated. They ask if by any chance he had done a gravitational magic and even say that they had never seen that before. I know that you do not know this, even because this academy has a lot to learn. Not only the students need to learn from me, but also all the professors. The guy farmed a lot of aura, guys. The ground becomes all crushed, and he continues humiliating that professor. Until then, he snaps his fingers and the magic is undone. Very angry, and the guy keeps throwing a tantrum and even says that that was a cheap trick and that he had not used spiritual power. The director realized that John, he was really very strong, and said that the situation was resolved. Meanwhile, the students, they noticed that whole scene in Miriam. She saw that definitely that was indeed a special spiritual art. But how was it possible for him to have evolved to reach that level of power since he was an inferior species? She knew that there was something wrong with that man. He definitely would not be just any teacher. 1 week had passed and the academy would begin the classes. Those students, they would be trained to be able to defeat the corruptors. And those students who could not keep up, they would be expelled. And it was here that I realized that Sebastian was Sebastiana, guys. It was a girl I did not know. The director said that if they managed to graduate, they would become great hunters and could even join the Holy Knights. All that would depend on their abilities. Someone approaches to talk with Miriam, and the guy keeps saying that it is very rare to see her attend the entrance ceremony and begins to make conversation, asking if she had already made friendship with the new students. However, something ended up calling his attention. It was the fact of having an inferior species professor. Miriam asks what that guy thought about that instructor, but the guy did not know very well what to say. That is right. He is an inferior species instructor who will teach us magical arts. Our hero realizes that he was being observed by those two, and at that moment he realized that everyone was looking at him. Those were cruel looks. He knew that he could not let things continue like that, because he would not gain respect and much less trust. He would need to convince those people that they were completely weak and useless, and that in fact only John could teach them to fight those creatures. That professor who was humiliated, he was there presenting the new instructor, and he even kept throwing hints, saying that those students should train at home, because maybe they would not learn everything there at the academy. He was wanting to say that an inferior species would not be capable of teaching them, and even asks if they are sure that they want to continue in that class. The students remained quiet, and the instructor realized that he had stained John's reputation even more. He still made a point of spreading news, saying that this professor he was frail, and next he asked John to introduce himself. "Well, as all of you heard, I am John, your new instructor. Our protagonist says that from now on he will teach them spiritual arts." That redhead asks if by any chance John thinks that he is apt for that. "Well, who will decide? That will be you. If you think that my class is not good enough, you can leave. But there is one condition. If you leave, you will not be able to return to watch my classes. Here you will learn that only spiritual energy is capable of preventing the regenerative abilities of the corruptors. But this regeneration blocking does not work against humans. That is because this power was created specifically to hunt the monsters. This power was created to kill corruptors. It seems that they did not have the slightest idea about that." And one of the boys keeps mocking, saying that this power was much older, and he even asks what an inferior species would know about that. While insulting John, the students began to laugh, and he realized that everyone there was making jokes. But our big guy, he remained quiet. "Well, if you think that I am weak, feel free to test me. You can use the strongest attack that you know. If you manage to hurt me, I promise to never appear again in this university." That big guy there, he keeps laughing and already prepares an electric spear. Even that professor there, Card, keeps screaming in fear, saying that even he will be hit. And so the boy prepares to launch it with everything. He throws that spear at the greatest speed, and when it hits, it creates a very thick smoke. Because of that, he keeps laughing, thinking that he had managed to defeat the professor, but then a blade appears from nowhere and ends up sticking into the wall behind him. The boy was shaking all over, and John said that if he had wanted to hit him, he would have done that, judging people. "Just by appearance will kill you, boy." The other students, they were dying of fear and even realized that this professor was much more powerful than they imagined. "Know that you understand nothing about spiritual art. Because of that, from now on, you can call me Master. By any chance, do you know the conditions to activate spiritual arts? You there who just attacked me, can you answer that?" The boy, he says that it is only to use imagination. He only imagined that that electric spear would appear in his hand, and thus it appeared. But John says that it is not only that, it would need something more. Spiritual power, it only manifested after you accepted the art, and that depended on the wavelength that flows through the body. And he still explains that there exist not 4 but 8 basic wavelengths, which were fire, lightning, healing, and the ice element that they were already familiar with. However, there existed 4 others, and that leaves them frightened, because they did not know that. There also existed gravity control and light level control. There also existed air pressure control that he had already shown before. And finally, there existed the spatial shield. The professor becomes in shock because that guy knew how to use all the elements and still had new elements. He says that that boy transformed lightning into a spear and had thrown it. And he even says that that was something very skillful. And now that he had already explained something basic, they should begin with the class. Later, the professor was passing through the corridor and knew that he would need to continue investigating this academy. The students were talking about him, but now they were speaking well, and at that moment he ended up meeting Miriam. He found it a little suspicious, and the girl kept staring at him. When he passed by her, the girl asked who he was, after all. "Well, I thought that you believed that I was only an inferior species." The girl admits that she was wrong, and says that he is much more incredible than all the other professors. He explains that she would also be able to use those elements that she still does not know. But the girl says that if that were easy, everyone would already be using it, and ends up calling John to go to another place to talk in private. While moving away from the corridors, she asks if he will answer the question that she had opened. She wanted to know where he was from. Then the guy says that he is an ancient man who slept in the village Kodama for 100 million years. But she keeps saying that he is a comedian. Alright, let us suppose that this is true. What were you doing 100 million years ago? Well, I was doing many things. In fact, I was a secret agent. She did not know what that was. Then he explains that it is someone who worked for the good of his country. He had fought against scum who wanted to harm other people. That was many years ago, and he begins to remember his work. At that time, he still did not have powers, guys, and even so, he was very strong. He had fought a lot against mobsters and keeps giving a smile, saying that those memories are very nostalgic. Miriam asks why someone like him would end up sleeping for 100 million years. And he says that he thought that he could fix everything if he tried alone. But his plan did not work 100% as he predicted, because the monsters continued spreading across the earth. Because of that, he accepted this job as an instructor to be able to help those people become more powerful. "By the way, girl, where are we going?" And she says that she has a job for him. When opening the door, she shows a place all dirty and says that she is serving as guide for him. Her brother Argus said that she would be the guide to help John investigate the Magic Academy. But when he arrives at that place, he keeps saying that it does not seem to have anything suspicious. However, he observes a strange object and that had called his attention. The girl says that she had also been investigating the academy and realized that in that warehouse there was a somewhat empty room between that wall and the outside wall. Because of that, our hero, he goes there and pulls the strange object and a secret door opens. He praises Miriam, saying that her guess was right. The girl asks how he knew that, and he points to that object saying that that place was clean, while all the rest was very dirty. But in fact that was because he was a secret agent, guys, and had a lot of experience, and he already goes straight inside. He even says that it must be dangerous there and that she should stay up there. But the girl, she says that she is one of the most powerful students of the Magic Academy, therefore she would be able to go there. Alright then, I trust you, let us go. He uses a fire magic to illuminate the path, but she was shaking all over, feeling a bad premonition. He even keeps telling some horror stories to scare her. The girl, she finds the stories very interesting and asks if he had been fighting those demons for so long. He says yes, and next Miriam asks if he already has any suspect. The guy keeps thinking, and next he says that the number one suspect is Ludman, that professor who may be involved. He was very calm when he was talking with people, but when he was not talking with anyone it seemed that he was always worried about something. Now that it seemed that that professor was always trying to spy on John, Miriam says that that other professor, Gita, also seems to be very suspicious, but our protagonist says that he is very expressive and would not be able to disguise it if he were involved in wrong things. Next they end up going down all the stairs. Miriam, she becomes surprised, because she did not imagine that there would be a place so spacious like that in the underground of the academy. Next she becomes surprised with what she was seeing. Even our hero did not expect to see that. There was a door exactly like the one from the laboratory where he was trapped for 100 million years. That meant that this place was also an ancient laboratory, guys, and thus we finished the first part of this story. If you reached here, comment the secret word, 100 million years. The more comments you leave, the more YouTube will recommend our video to other people. Thank you very much to everyone who is leaving the comment and leaving a hype. You are incredible. I will leave his recommendation here on the card, 2 videos from the channel that I am sure you will like, so we will see each other there. For the rest, that is it. Thanks and see you later, guys.